Everybody, welcome. I'm excited to introduce a good friend of mine today and get to hear about her story. So welcome, Mandela Schumacher Hodge Dixon. So, woo!
Thanks, Dave. I'm
And,
so excited for this
and
conversation.
you're in the Bay Area virtually, but you're not in the Bay Area.
I know. I told you I have my virtual background because I'm actually not in the Bay Area, but I'm still representing. So I'm based in Oakland, California, but right now I'm in Long Island, New York, visiting family for the first time since the pandemic.
Wow, that's exciting. And great news. I saw the post. I saw some previous posts from vacation that there was this cute little baby strategically positioned, and then the announcement on Father's Day, like, we're expecting a second one. So congratulations. That's exciting.
Thank you so much. I am very pregnant right now and excited about it.
Exactly, in Long Island in the heat. So
Yeah.
you got that going for you. Well, awesome. So everybody, Mandela and I have a fun history and track record. We got to work together at Startup Weekend, and where she ran all the academic programs and was probably the best Saturday night dance party facilitator in all Startup Weekends globally. And there was 1,265 of them that year. So I'm just saying, not that it wasn't, it was a high bar.
Yeah, I know how to have a good time, Dave.
And and I got to follow her to Brazil, which everybody's disappointed I wasn't as entertaining as Mandela was, for sure. So tell the folks on the line, tell them about you first, and then we'll talk about Founder Jim next. And give us a little background on you and how you got to this crazy entrepreneur journey thing you're on.
So again, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing a little bit of your workday with us. Where Dave and I intersected, as he mentioned, was at Startup Weekend, and that actually has a big role into my entrepreneurial journey. Back in 2011, I was actually a PhD student on my way to becoming a professor, and I discovered something that changed my life forever. It was a Startup Weekend education event. I think it was either the first or second only education themed event. I went with my then boyfriend at the time, so I'm grateful for his role in this. And I was exposed to entrepreneurship for the very first time, and I fell head over heels in love with it. And that was June 6, 2011. So it's been officially a decade in my entrepreneurial journey, and I have a lot to thank Startup Weekend for. And fast forward, after that first startup, I ended up joining Startup Weekend as an employee, and that's where Dave and I officially intersected. And then I would say before that, I was a teacher. I taught sixth grade English and social studies in South Central Los Angeles, also Pacoima, California. In my life before that, I was an elite athlete. So I don't know if we have any soccer players on here, or footballistas, but I was an elite soccer player. I played in the Olympic development program, and then I was a captain of a Division I college at NC State. And and then I would also just add that I'm the daughter of two civil rights attorneys and social justice advocates. So that's a really big part of who I am and the work I do in the world.
Awesome. I love it. So then off to Founder Jim. So tell us a little bit about how Founder Jim got started, and then we'll get to what you're doing with it today.
Yeah.
I love the backstory on Founder Jim and what you've been working on.
For sure. So when Founder Jim, my current company, was ideated, I was actually working at a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. It was called Cohort Capital. And it was really a pioneer in investing in underrepresented founders, as well as founders focused on closing gaps of access for low income communities and communities of color in the United States. And basically, it gave me a purview into about 120 tech companies all at the same time. And one of the things I noticed was the disparities in understanding when it came to raising venture capital as a tool to accelerate your growth in startups. And I felt like my background as an entrepreneur, my background as a trained educator, I felt like I could build a program. And I didn't call it a school, I call it a gym. And that was with the intention of infusing a little bit of my athletic background and sports psychology into it. But today, what it is, it's a 6-week training program. It's always been 100% virtual. We have trained over 550 founders around the world across 6 continents, 25 countries on how to raise capital. And so some of the proud stats we have is that our graduates have raised over 106 million in the last 3 years. And we actually are the #1 training program for Black women in particular, who've gone on to raise over $1 million.
I love it. I was doing an event 2 weeks ago with a Fearless Fund.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the gals who had gone through your program was on office hours with me, and she's like, "Oh my God, I know it." And it was like, okay, this is a funny intersection of life, right? So, but And for those of you on the call, you may remember the Riveter, and Amy Nelson was in what, your first cohort, second cohort?
Amy Nelson was in cohort #1 in foundership. Yeah, she was in our very first cohort. And yeah, she's a good friend of mine as well.
She's awesome. So we were sad to see her leave Seattle. I'm always, whenever somebody leaves for whatever reason, we lost some during the pandemic. Somebody went to Austin,
Yeah, I
moved to
know.
Ohio. I'm like, it hurts me to have them go. But
I know, but their roots are in Seattle.
yeah, well, and frankly, we're exporting amazing talent, right? So I'm not sure the scorecard's in our favor yet, but it'll swing back, right, at some point. So tell me about Founder Jim today. Like,
Mhm,
how has that kind of morphed over time? Because you went out with a very deliberate intent,
mhm.
and now you've got some really kind of crazy momentum. What's happening there now?
Yeah, well, we've had the good fortune of working with the best of the best, including you, Dave, right? So, I really try to approach building a startup, like probably many of you who are listening, like an experiment. I had an original hypothesis of what I thought could work. Originally, the program was actually 4 weeks in duration. And I thought that, it takes 21 days to develop a new habit. I really believe I can accelerate people's mastery in this content area in 3 weeks. And then I'll give them a week of graduation day, which is like our version of demo day. And over time of testing that model, I realized they need another week for practice before graduation day. And then there was additional content that the founders needed and different types of expertise they needed. So eventually we landed on a 6-week model. And that's the model we've been really executing against over the last 3+ years in total. And so what I'd say is, again, our core focus has primarily been on teaching underrepresented founders, whether these are women, African Americans, Latinx founder, LGBTQIA founders, veteran founders, anyone who feels like their representation in the tech space is under what it is in the overall population. This is a place where we want to feel like they belong and that it's a safe space for them to learn and accelerate their growth and also meet with other like-minded founders. So how we've changed, I would just say, at this point, we probably have brought in investors and partners from nearly every top tier venture capital firm, at least in the United States. And, we're really proud of that because we have a high bar of excellence for the way in which we operate our programming and the caliber at which we really want to prepare founders for the real game of venture capital. Now, where Dave intersected with Founder Jam was actually in a new program we launched called the Money Magnet Program. And what we realized, Dave, once the pandemic hit, the biggest question we were getting from founders was, will venture capital dry up? It was such unknown territory. It was hard for investors to predict what was happening. And so they were holding tighter to their purse strings this time last year. And so a lot of founders were, for the first time, really faced with having to generate revenue and having to have other models of sustainability outside of venture capital. So we decided to create a new program that was very much modeled after our fundraising cohort, but was focused on helping founders build multiple revenue streams and really learn the nuts and bolts of building a real business and monetizing it with or without venture capital.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what a tremendous need and opportunity for Average there too. That's very cool. So I want to talk about, topic today is really your why and mindset. And as I've talked with folks about my enthusiasm for having this interview with you, I'm like, I am so nuts and bolts focused. And I'm like, and then there's Mandela, who's so inspirational that's my aspiration part. So I'm super curious, as you've been, really helping out a market that's really been locked out of venture capital,
Mhm.
right? But for your own journey too,
Mhm.
like, tell me about, for founders who are on the call and for the founders you work with, how do they discover their why, right? Because I think that one can be more obscure than product market fit, right? Because for me, product market fit is math, but the
Yeah.
why one is like, it can be really hard for some founders. So help us pull that one through.
Yeah, I think it was a certain book I read, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that I was introduced to the concept of a personal mission statement. And at that point, when I read the book, I had already done my first business, and I didn't really start with me when I was building my business. And the difference between a personal mission statement and a business mission statement is the personal mission statement is really about, what are you up to in this lifetime? What legacy do you want to to leave behind? What scorecard are you measuring your success by? And then how does a business mission statement, model, plan fit into your overarching theme of your life? And so I actually think it's incredibly important for people to have and to do the work of self-awareness, which is an ongoing journey about who you actually are. And even though right now in this chapter and season of my life, I'm teaching people venture capital is just one way to build a business and leverage it as a tool. But most businesses aren't structured for that type of financing, right? And so I am also a proponent of helping people become educated about who they are and what's the right business model for them. But when I think about your why, I think about, when you're on your deathbed, taking your last breath and you look back at your life, right? What will make you feel at peace? What will make you feel whole and complete? Because that's truly my vision for myself. And I think as I've talked to many, many people over the years, some massively successful and some on their way to success, that's actually what we want at the end of the day. Is we want to have meaning, purpose. We want to know that our existence mattered. And so beginning with the end in mind is so important. Why are you here? And then how does this business serve why you are here? The alignment is incredibly important. And so if you haven't read the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I strongly recommend it. Or if it's been collecting dust, take a look at that. And then also Essentialism really changed things for me too, which I read right when I was launching Founder Gym. And essentialism really is kind of a slap in the face about just like how you are spending and spreading your time and energy across so many different things. And just realizing we all have a finite amount of time on this earth, and just being more conscientious of how you're spending your time and making sure it's aligned to the ROIs, the return on investment that you want in this lifetime.
It's funny. I think when I look across and talk with investors and such about programming stuff that we've done, and some of it's been incredibly successful and some of it's been okay. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things that always is a consistent theme is there's lots of things you can teach, mm-hmm. but self-awareness isn't one of them. Because there's times where I'm like, how do you teach somebody who's not self-aware to be self-aware?
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I think, I think I think almost everything is learnable. I don't know if I want to say everything is like all-encompassing statement.
I don't know that I have an answer.
It's been imprinted in time forever, and people are going to replay this. Mandela, you said this back on June 22nd. Okay. But I think that what I do, like when I'm working with founders who, again, primarily are at the pre-seed, seed, Series A stage, that's like my sweet spot with the founders I work with, is that I always start with their legacy statement. I say, what is your legacy, right? Like, what do you want people to say about you? I ask them about their goals and break it down to quarterly goals, monthly goals, weekly goals, daily goals, all the stuff that probably, I know actually that your area of expertise is in, Dave. But I think prompting people and just asking the questions is such a trigger for so many people, because the way in which we're assimilated in this society and the way in which the K-12 model, kindergarten through 12, the collegiate, and again, I come from the world of academia, it doesn't necessarily ask you those questions, right? Sure. Mm-hmm. And so I think even just creating a space for people to be prompted to have time to think through who are they and what they want, I actually think it's pretty foreign for most people. If I sit most people down, I say, what's your mission statement? What's your legacy? What's your why? I don't think most people, from my experience, have the answer, right? But they also haven't been in environments that have cultivated and encouraged them to really go inward. But I think that what I have learned from studying successful people for the last decade and kind of reverse engineering their success and trying to turn it into a curriculum is that so many of them prioritize self-awareness and really understanding who they are and who they aren't. Because at the end of the day, success is a team sport. And this is one of the hard lessons I had to learn. Like, I can't be everything. I can't be the CEO, COO, CFO, CTO. It's just not going to work. The limitations of the business are in alignment with your limitations as the individual. And so the more self-aware you are, you will understand your strengths and your weaknesses, and then how to fill those gaps with other team members who can help really create the whole package of success for the business.
And I love that. I think that the thing that's I was struck by is, but by the time sometimes they get to me, they're like, no, no, I just want to talk about the business, and I just want to talk about business mechanics. And I'm like, yeah, but why are you here? Like, what's
Yeah.
the bigger picture? Why? And
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite quotes is like, it doesn't matter how fast you climb up the ladder if the ladder's facing against the wrong wall.
oh my gosh, that is
You
so
know what I mean?
very
It's
practical.
like
Wow.
you're
Yeah.
in such a rush to get where, right? And why? And I can't tell you how many people I have coached from pre-seed to seed, seed to Series A beyond, and they don't feel fulfilled. It's like they did it, but it's like, well, why? And you really, and another thing I also realized, because I was just talking to a founder, one of our graduates, again, she became another historic stat, becoming one of the first Black women. There's only 93 in the world who've ever raised over $1 million. I mean, it's a small amount of people. And she was oversubscribed on her round. And she called me up and she says, Mandela, I feel unmotivated. Like, okay, I hit this goal. I did it, right? You were like a drill sergeant. And she comes from a Division I sports background too. When we set goals, we can hit them. We're motivated. But once that goal has been hit, it's kind of like, okay, now what? So you also have to reinvest yourself and reimagine your why. As you become increasingly more successful and you've achieved the things you once dreamed of, then it's like you got to set your sights higher. It's about growth, and growth is when you feel alive. So I think your why can also change over time.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Because I know, as I look back now over both some successes and failures,
Mhm.
there are some things that have stayed very consistent. There's seasons where I had very deliberate goals and seasons where I didn't. And then when I look back, you're like, oh no, when I had those goals, I definitely achieved more. And I would just encourage folks on the line, like, just because it's not January 1st doesn't mean you can't do that today.
Oh, Dave, you should see my journal. I was up for hours yesterday, like asking myself, who are you? Like what, like knowing what you know now, like, because now I'm gearing up to be a two-time mom. I'm changing, right? My perspective, my experiences are changing who I am and how I see the world and what I want to do. And it's so important to have these checkpoints in your year to just have time and a conversation with yourself about what you want, and just you'll feel so much more fueled and invigorated even to just get on with your day.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's good practical advice. Like, find some time. Journaling's always been super important. For me, it's getting away, and I'm at a different point with kids, so I can get away and cycle on the weekends. So, because I've got a couple out of the house, but it was like on Saturday, I was out with some friends cycling, and it was it was a 3-hour ride,
Yeah.
and it's a good time to process stuff,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm
Mhm.
still aware of what's going on around me, but I'm not super focused on what's like.
Yeah, yeah. We've all probably seen the headlines of how some of the most successful people sleep a lot, they meditate. Like I was just watching a video of Jack Dorsey, Twitter and Square founder, and he meditates 2 hours a day. He has a strict like eating regimen where he primarily only eats dinner. He doesn't eat lunch and breakfast, but he's very structured in how he fuels himself and spends time with himself and goes inward in order to have that impact outward. So it's something I'm still working on. I'm definitely not on that level at all.
Yeah,
At
two little
all.
kids, one, and you
Yes,
come in the second little kid, that's going to be a challenge.
yes, exactly. He's unmarried without children. I'm married with children. I've made other commitments outside of my business and myself, right? That's a life I've signed up for. But again, it's just to kind of figure out where on the spectrum you want to fit, right?
Right.
And I think that's another thing too.
Right.
Yeah, because I've had to have these conversations with my husband too. I'm an entrepreneur and it may seem like I'm a workaholic, right? But there's a certain level of balance of play, rest, work for me that probably doesn't work for 99% of people, but it works for me. It works for my flow. But this comes on with self awareness and being able to communicate to your loved ones who you are and set proper expectations.
And I think being deliberate too is a big part of that, especially if you're thinking about leaving your day job, you're working it, you've got a family, wherever you are in that life continuum. Thinking through and being deliberate about it will definitely be appreciated from your spouse. Like, we just had our 34th anniversary yesterday.
Oh my goodness, congratulations.
Didn't think I was that old, but apparently it snuck up on me. But yeah, I always tell people it's always good that I get my annual renewal. As long as I'm not going month to month, it's probably a good sign, right? So, but I
Yeah.
think being deliberate about it and talking with your spouse and partner or whatever
Oh,
is so helpful, because there's seasons of life where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm working like a crazy person. And there's
yes.
seasons of life you're like, yeah, this is actually, I'm gonna take a little bit of time.
Yes, and it's all, Dave, you touch on such an important topic, and I'm sure we can do a whole masterclass with you and your advice on a 34-year lasting marriage. But seriously, the whole point of what you're saying is like be in communication about the seasons that you're in and what works for each other. But like we talk about the importance of co-founders, but like your intimate partner is your life co-founder. It's your co-founder for life. And like we have a mission statement, we have a plan, we have meetings, and that's what works for us. But I find that the more in self-aware I am and in communication about that with my partner, the more positively it impacts my business. Because when there's tension in home, like even though I put on my CEO hat when I log into my Founder Gym email, I'm still Mandela. I still got baggage I'm carrying with me and drama in my family, right? But when things are in flow, I mean, it's just easier. You have less tension and roadblocks, even creatively.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I want to shift a little bit to mindset, because one of the things that I think founders struggle with is like, I'm gonna go do this, and I'm just gonna keep hammering away at it. And I want to talk about two sides of mindset. I want to talk about mindset first and where the mindset needs to be, but I also want to talk about taking no's,
Mhm.
right? And how you've taken no's, because I know you've had some distinct no's and how you've gone to it. But I want to start with mindset first for everybody's benefit, but then I want to move on to that taking no's as well.
Yeah, I believe that your brain is a muscle. I really do. And I really believe like your heart, every part of you is a muscle that can be worked out. And oftentimes, it's so underutilized. You're just not working it out properly, whether it's your soul, your spirit, your heart, your mind, whatever you believe in, your higher being. I believe that everything starts in the mind. Like it goes from the unmanifested between your two ears, in your spirit, wherever you got the idea from, out into the world and manifest it. There is something that happens. You are a creative being. Like that's my fundamental belief. And so recognizing that first and foremost, the power that you have, every single thing we experience, right, outside of nature's law is man-made, human-made, women-made. It's all made up. Zoom, this computer, the AirPods that I was supposed to wear that I didn't, this hat, like it's all been created. And so it's just like if you just stop and let that sit with you of just what creative beings we are, and that you right there listening have the ability to bring forth whatever you want into the world, and just like recognizing the power in that, it is so inspiring. And I think once I had that like epiphany, like, oh my gosh, like everything's made up. Like it was just made by someone who lived before me. That's it. And like what, and I watched that Steve Jobs commencement speech, I don't know how many times. I'm sure everybody else watched it, but he very much shares the same ethos, just about like these people aren't smarter than you. They were here before you. They
Right.
took the initiative to bring forth their ideas and bring it from the unmanifested into the manifested, but you have that power too. So I just believe the recognition of the power and then the control of the power is so important, and kind of figuring out what method of bringing something between your two ears out into the world for other people to experience works best for you, what timeline, what format, all that stuff. But your mind is everything. And I personally believe in growth mindset, not a fixed mindset, right? Where a fixed mindset is like, I am who I am and I was made this way and I am unchangeable.
For
Versus,
everybody who's listening, that's Angela Dweck's book, right? Growth Mindset.
yeah,
So we're both big readers. So if you're looking for books to add to your reading list, put Angela Dweck's book on it. It's brilliant.
yes,
It's not as accessible as like Seven Habits, but
yes.
it's super brilliant. So
Yes, yes. So you go
please.
from a fixed mindset of feeling like your life's plan is written in like stone versus no, like the pen is in your hand. It's actually a pencil. It has an eraser, and like you can mold yourself and design yourself. Like I heard someone else say the other day, I don't know, I watch a lot of YouTube videos for motivation, so that's a tactical thing I do. But it's like you like I don't believe in people being self-made. Like to me, like self-made doesn't mean you did it by yourself, but it does mean that you designed yourself, you designed your life, and that you work to bring that design to fruition. And so a growth mindset is like, I don't know how to do it yet. I'm interested in figuring out, and I believe that I can. But if that belief is never there, I mean, you really have stopped yourself before you even began. And you've all heard the I am statements. Whatever you say after I am is your truth, right? But it's so honest and raw. And I know it sounds cliche, and we probably saw it on our, in our locker room posters in high school. I am awesome. But it truly is. You have to be your number one cheerleader. And going into the other question you asked me about how I deal with failure, I think that one of the things I've recognized as I've gotten older, I don't come from a background of financial privilege, right? And I believe there's all sorts of privileges in the world, right? Sometimes your privilege can be what you look like, how pretty you are in that society, what race you are, how tall you are, how you speak, your accent, your religion. All sorts of things indicate privilege depending on what society you live in. And one of the privileges that we oftentimes talk about is a financial privilege, like who had the money to do X, Y, and Z. I don't come from a background that had financial privilege, but what I do realize now more than ever is I had the privilege of a psychological safety net with my family, and that my parents believed in me like beyond my belief in myself. Like I had to borrow my parents' eyes all the time because they could see things for me that I couldn't see. And so I that was the privilege that I had, that when it came time for me to make the decision to drop out of my top 6 PhD program, the program I worked my ass off to get into, to go into this crazy world called entrepreneurship before it was cool and hot, right? Like this was 2011. It was not on most people's radar, nor a safe path.
A lot of career choice.
Yeah, yeah. Dave, and I was having a mental breakdown, and I called my mom, who is still kind of like my best friend. And she was like, whatever you want to do, it'll be fine. Like, it wasn't like she could float me money to create a runway. It wasn't like she could let me stay in a condo that she owned till I didn't have to pay rent. We didn't have that type of privilege, but just the knowing that she supported me and believed in me has given me wings that have allowed me to fly higher than I could have ever imagined. And I think having that experience, that firsthand experience of someone who believes in you, just the belief in you, and being able to borrow that until you believe in yourself, that's what I hope to do for other people. And that is like the core of just reminding people who the hell they are and how powerful they are. Because so much of society, whether it's your family, school system, work settings, kind of chip away at you. And, I went from being a teacher of students, like 6th graders, I'm talking about like 10, 11-year-olds, to adults. We have a person in our program right now who's in her 60s. We have people who are in their 40s. We have people who are in their 40s. Most are in their 30s and 20s, but we have a broad range of ages. And one thing I've learned about working with adult learners, they bring a lot of baggage, and they are very, they bring a lot of baggage because they've been through stuff. And so much of what we have to work on is their mindset, unlearning what doesn't serve them, and then rewiring them to see themselves differently so that they can be in interaction with people where there is a power dynamic, an investor and a founder. And then the last thing I'll say on this topic of persevering past your nose is that I keep something, and I tell everybody, keep a receipt box. It could be a physical shoebox with like handwritten notes, or it could be a digital document in Evernote. But your receipt box is a record of all those times in your life someone said you couldn't do it and you did it, or all those times in your life you thought you couldn't do it and you did it, or the things that you've been able to do that most people aren't, right? You need to keep a record, because there are going to be days, and there are still days in my life all the time, where I forget who I am and how powerful I am, or I let a no hurt me, or someone's lack of ability to see my worth impact me. And I go back to my receipt box and I'm like, wait a second. I've been through this before. And look what happened. And it's just a reminder that you've already done it and you can do it again.
Yeah, I think it's for founders too. I think one of the challenges at times is the gap between somebody telling no, they don't like your business idea, and they've internalized that business idea as them and their personally.
Yes.
So how do you help those founders deal with that? Because I know that's always a challenge.
Yeah, so this, Dave, goes back to what we were talking about before. Separate your personal mission statement from your business. The business should fit into your personal mission statement. You are much bigger than your business. Your business is one part of you in this chapter of your life. Like however many years or months you've been working on this business, divide that by how many years you've been alive. Right? It's just such a small percentage of your life. And to keep that in perspective is so important. So, again, if you really take the time to work on your personal mission statement and understand how this chapter of your life is in alignment with that, but there may be other things. Oh, there's going to be plenty of things I'm going to do in my lifetime, right? I'm in the season of Founder Jim right now, but because I know I'm in that season, I also don't wrap my worth up in it, right? I know I'm playing a bigger game. Founder Jim is one step in the bigger game.
Love it. So talk a little bit about, I know for depending on where you are in your career and where you are in life, one of the challenges is, I need to get a restraining order against the voices in my head.
Oh, I don't know where you're going with that. That's a restraining order against who?
Just the voices in my head, right? It's not, it's one I see now as I talk to younger folks and I talk to, folks just coming out of, and they have so convinced themselves they can't do something before they even try.
Yeah.
That, I guess that from my self-talk was always and continues to be, I may not be the smartest person in the room, but I will outwork almost anybody in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I talk to just, how do you help founders cope with the whole, like, hey, quit listening to the voices in your head.
Yeah, I have not figured out how to get rid of the voices in my head. They are very prevalent. I have tried on and off meditation. Like I'm not on the Jack Dorsey 2 hours a day meditation. I was listening to Deepak Chopra this morning. He's like 2 hours of meditation every day. I was like, I hear you, homie, but I got to work on it. So, like, I want to give that context as like, I'm still working on it. And I think a lot of people are, and it's important for, I think, even people who are put in positions like I am right now to talk to you all, to let you know we're still a work in progress too. But I would say what has worked for me about the voices in my head is journaling. Like literally, I have a cadence every day where I start my day with gratitude, just the recognition of what I already have. Like I'm alive, like, hey, already winning, points on the board. I can breathe. I'm healthy, right? I'm next to a husband who loves me, winning, right? Like just even the little things to remind yourself you're already winning. You're already winning. That has been a game changer for me, just to start my day on the vibration of gratitude and a recognition for what I already have. The other thing I do is I set an intention. So what is my intention for the day? Sometimes my intention is just to talk less, listen more. Sometimes my intention is to drink 10 cups of water, right? It depends on what it is for the day, but it helps me focus. And so rather than letting my mind go in a million different directions, I've already set at least like one strong intention for the day that kind of guides me to just stay focused on it. But I would say the other thing is your environment. Your environment is so important. Whether that environment is like real life human beings that you have in your home or your apartment or wherever you live, or it's your environment that you concoct for yourself on the internet, right? What are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you consuming? What are people around you saying? Are they doing negative self-talk too, right? And so you're just buying into all the gossip and stuff. But who you surround yourself with, again, and like human relationships or online relationships is so important, because you can't bloom if you are planted in the wrong environment. You just can't. It doesn't matter like what's already in your DNA. If you're planted in the wrong soil, you're not getting access to the right nutrients and positivity, it will seep into you, even on a unconscious, subconscious level. So I think for me, I'm very conscious about who I surround myself with. And like I was just even at an event this weekend, and there was a table and they were just gossiping about who da 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 da. And I said, I'm a steer hard right. And I just didn't want that energy. And so you really have to curate, who you're around, because you would be surprised at how much their mindset is impacting your mindset.
Yeah. I think, and too, I look back early and, we're just getting out of college and having somebody say, hey, listen, who you surround yourself with in the next 10 years is going to determine the outcome for sure.
Yeah.
And now I can look back and go like, oh yeah, those people, were awesome. Or, yeah, those people I'm glad I don't hang out with anymore.
Yeah. And Dave, this is where I think it's really hard if you're an entrepreneur. Like, you very much oftentimes are an outlier in your network and where you come from. You're an outlier. Most people in the world have 9-to-5 jobs, and they stay with 9-to-5 jobs the rest of their lives. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want different for yourself and you choose the path of entrepreneurship, you are also choosing different from the status quo. So you have to understand that the effort you need to make to plant yourself in the right environment to be the best entrepreneur you can be has to be really intentional. And we're fortunate, it's 2021. There's events like the one we're doing right now. There's podcasts, there's books like Dave had, there's programs like I've created, right? There's all sorts of places you can find your space and your belonging, your community. But you do need to be intentional and stand guard at the entrance of your mind to really check yourself on what you're letting in.
Yeah, look, I can look back to I have a photo on my phone of my grandfather's. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My dad never was, right? Because I think he watched the craziness that was,
Yeah.
right? And I actually wrote that into the introduction for the book with the kids, because I'm like, I don't know if they'll ever be entrepreneurs, but I'll be proud of them whatever they do, right? Because they're following their own mission. But the whole idea of like looking backwards to 1911 and my grandfather having the first Ford garage, right,
Wow.
in southwestern Washington. He sold it too early, right? But he started the first phone company, but then he sold that too early, right?
Mhm.
So the whole like the you have to recognize, I think, and be around people who are supportive of you, ask good questions. But your cousin or brother-in-law who's had a career job doing whatever is not going to be able to relate to this great
Yes.
thing you're doing.
Yes. And did you have a relationship with your grandfather?
He passed away before I was born, but
Okay.
the legacy is
But
super.
look
It
at the
hangs an interesting shadow, right?
right? Even this person who you weren't able to cross paths with on this side of, the realm, he still had such a big impact on you, and knowing his existence. And I'm sure maybe you've had imaginary conversations with him and like getting advice from him, but people, you really do have to create like your own tribe, your own network of people who can understand and affirm you. It doesn't mean to deprioritize your other relationships, but those relationships serve a purpose. And if you're looking for affirmation, positivity, understanding, guidance, advice on this path you're taking, you have to ask yourself, who are you surrounding yourself with?
Right. Hey, speak to I love getting this question, so I'm going to bounce it to you instead, because it's always one of those where I'm like, tell me about following your passion, and is that enough? Right. So I was on a podcast the other day I won't give it the title of the podcast, but that was part of the title, and I'm like, I don't think it's just.
Yeah. No, I had to learn this the hard way. And I train entrepreneurs on this all day long. This is not my quote, this is actually a quote from our graduates, but following your passion is great. It's important. It's an impetus. It's a catalyst. You should be in alignment. But a business at the end of the day is an exchange of a service or product for the currency of that society, right? Like, it's an exchange of value. And, one of the things this founder said, her name is Kai Frazier. She said, when the money stops, the mission stops. And so you just have to understand, and I had to learn this the hard way, coming from an educator background into this business world. I'm like, it's all about student outcomes and how is this impacting the students? And the investor's like, how are you making money? Do you have enough money to pay yourself? Do you have enough money to grow your team? But it's so true. Like, I think a lot of the founders I coach, and I still continue to coach, over index on the mission and undervalue the importance of the money. The money is the fuel for the mission to happen. And you cannot have the mission without the money, even if you're a nonprofit. Even if you're a nonprofit, how are you paying yourself? You're raising money at galas, or you're doing Kickstarter campaign. You know what I mean? Money pays your bills, it pays your salary, pays your team, it pays the technology, the software, the fees, everything it takes to run a business. And so passion is important, but it cannot be the only thing. It must not be. And so you really need to have a sound business in place. And so again, I'm just going to plug Dave's book. Make sure you read Dave's book. Dave is all about the nuts and bolts of the business, but it's a beautifully crafted handbook for any entrepreneur to really get their foundation in place to build a sustainable business.
Yeah, it's always one of those for me. Is I talk to a founder who's like, no, no, they said follow your passion and money will follow. And it's back to your point on the ladder. It's like, as I have my sons are going through career advice right in their 20s, and I'm like, you have a ladder, congratulations, wrong wall, right?
Yes.
Like, ah, it's so frustrating.
Yes, and yes. You need to fund your dreams. You really, really do. And you have to figure out where that funding is going to come from. One source, multiple sources, the strength of that, how you can make it better. It is so instrumental. And so, yes, I'm all about pursuing your passion for sure. Because if you just have money without the passion, you also could be extremely unfulfilled, right? But I think that it's trying to find the marriage between the two, the money and the mission, and marrying the two and working on that, because that's my core belief. Like, I'm trying to help more good people become wealthy. That's my mission in the world. I want to help more good people who have really a framework for changing the world in a positive way, a more inclusive way. I'm trying to help them get the bag. Why? Because then they can fuel the work they're doing to bring forth the world that they envision.
Yeah, totally agree. I want to open it up for folks to start to ask questions. You can put them in the chat window. I've got that up here. You raise your hand. I want to give you guys a chance to get to know Mandela, and I'm running for the president of her fan club, so make sure you vote for me after this. So I've been running for a while. The position's not open yet, but I'm going to keep advocating for it. So if you have questions for it, put them in the chat window, and we'll come to those ones too. So when you look at the challenges that sit ahead for your founders going through the current cohort, how is fundraising out there for underrepresented founders? What are, I mean, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, when we were together, there are things we talked about, but they weren't actually changing. Are you seeing
Yeah.
actual change?
Yes. So there's two sides of the table. You have the founders, right? Which Founder Jim is focused on training, but you have the people who hold the purse strings, which is the venture capitalists and other people deploying capital. And so one of the things for people to really understand the big shift in the last 10 years is that when I was starting in 2011, there was about probably max, again, this isn't rigorous research. This is just quick anecdotes of all the people I know. There was about 50 million total in capital managed by Black fund managers. That's it, 50 million. And you would know how small of a number that is if you really understand how big of a pie venture capital is and how much money they're deploying. Now in 2021, that's 20x. There is $1 billion, right, in management by Black fund managers. So one of the things to understand is that there's more capital going to underrepresented founders than ever before. So if you are an underrepresented founder on here, like, I would find that encouraging. When I was starting out, right, it just wasn't the same landscape. And so it's not to say that being underrepresented and your identity alone is enough to raise capital. It's not. You have to build a business. This is about building a business. This is capitalism. This isn't philanthropy. So, like, I don't want to sell the story of, like, if you check this box, you will have a higher likelihood of raising capital. That's not it at all. Actually, less than 1% of venture capital goes to Black founders. Less than 13% of venture capital goes to women founders, right? Like, it's still a horrible situation that we're all working on. But I think to answer your question, Dave, things are changing. Even though they're not where we want them to be, they are absolutely changing. So I think the appetite both for investors who are interested in investing in historically underfunded founders is increasing, but also the interest from underrepresented founders to participate in this game is increasing. So it's just a really interesting time. And, only time will tell what happens in another 10 years and what manifests with this influx of capital in this direction. But it is definitely different from when I started.
I love it. I love it. So Heather asked the question here, where can we find out more about the Money Magnet program? Is there any discussion of raising crowd equity?
Yeah. Oh, we have a lot of founders raise equity crowdfunding, like on Start Engine and Republic. We actually had the first Black man to ever raise at the time it was 1.07 million max on Republic, and he set that record. Was it last year, or the year before? Maybe it was 2019. I can't remember. But yes, you can find more about the Money Magnet program. We kind of have done like a private beta test of it, honestly, and it just keeps expanding. So email my team at hello@founderjim.com, and we can give you more information about it if you're interested. And any other questions you have.
Awesome. And then Saudi Garcia says, hey, Mandela, my name is Saudi, and I'm completing my PhD and thinking about pivoting to entrepreneurship to solve some problems in graduate training. Your story is really inspiring. How did you work through leaving an academic culture that's insular, sometimes toxic, and that doesn't value work behind the academy?
How did I leave? Well, I figured if I got into a PhD program once, I could get in again if I ever chose to go back. So that was one thing. And I think another thing too, context is important. I was just at the beginning of my PhD program. I was in year one. So when I looked at how much time, capital, et cetera, sweat equity I had put into it versus taking the leap and putting that same energy, time, sweat equity into a startup, I decided to go for the startup. But again, it was with the context that I hadn't invested years upon years in doing a dissertation into my PhD before I dropped out. So you may be carrying more of a weight in that you may be further along in your program. But I would say, knowing what you know now, what outcome will finishing a PhD program provide you versus if you leave now, what outcome could you potentially create for yourself? And I just think, you have to do a cost benefit analysis of it. I mean, that's what I do, honestly, is I have like a sheet, I go to pros and cons and I analyze it all. But then at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you the truth. At the end of the day, I go with my gut. Every time I go with my gut. And this is kind of the woo-woo self-aware stuff we were talking about, but it's true. There's something that your intuition serves you. And if it is pulling you so hard and you've run the numbers, you've done the calculations, you've thought 10 levels deep, 20 levels wide, and you still are feeling a certain way, like trust the feeling, trust yourself. This is the growth mindset we were talking about, is that you never are going to have enough data to make the perfect decision. And this is one of the earliest lessons you'll learn as a CEO. Doesn't matter how much data you gather, market research, you will try to get the most data to present the best decision. But at the end of the day, it's your decision. And you have to trust your ability to course correct as needed. So I think for me, I decided if I got in once, I can get in again if I want to get into a PhD. Another thing you may want to consider is instead of dropping out, ask for a deferment. That way, you don't have to make a decision now. You can kind of kick the can down the road. And I'm assuming that if you've already invested a significant amount of time in the program, they may actually allow you to do a deferment. They didn't allow me to do a deferment. So I had an ultimatum. Either I'm in or I'm out. I said, well, deuces, I'm out. And, again, I may come back one day. I'm not ruling that out. But I think it was my just the feeling I ultimately had in knowing that I had turned over every stone in my thinking about it, but I still felt this way. That honestly was it at the end of the day. And I just trusted my ability to course correct.
I love it. I think one of the comments that Jeff Bezos has made in I think it was the last book that just came out, he talked about making a decision when you have 60% of the data.
Mm-hmm.
But some of us are like, I need more data to make a decision.
Yeah.
The whole, like, at some point you have to start getting good at trusting your gut.
Yeah.
Right. And the 60% number feels like that's hardly even enough data to make a decision.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, oh, 80%. Yeah. 90%. Sure. But the perfect set of data is never there. And 60% feels light, but maybe it's a good challenge.
Yeah. And yes, I'm so glad you brought it up. That was much better way of saying what I said, but it
Jeff
was, and from
that.
somebody who really has an incredible track record of building businesses. It's so true though, this analysis paralysis thing, whether you're already in entrepreneurship and running a business, or you're kind of tinkering between, you're on the fence, should I stay here or should I go there to entrepreneurship? You're never going to have a complete data set. This is where you have to learn how to trust yourself. And the only way to, I think, strengthen your trust in yourself is to do it. You got it. And my motto is do it afraid. Do it, right? I do things afraid all the time. And then I realize, oh my gosh, I'm still here. Oh my gosh, like it's okay. It's okay.
Question here from Dan Kihanye says, inspiring thoughts, Mandela. Question 1, origin story for your awesome name.
Okay.
Great question. Q2, what's the frustration with venture? that you'd love to change if you could wave the magic wand and fix it instantly?
Oh, okay. So my origin of my name, like I told you, I am the daughter of two civil rights attorneys. They were actually involved in the anti-apartheid movement going on in the 1980s, late 1970s. And so when I was conceived, my parents said whether or not it's a boy or girl, it's going to be named Mandela after Nelson Mandela, who was actually still in prison at the time. He did a total of 28 years in prison. He was still in prison when I was born in 1985. And so I carried his name, and then he was released from prison. As we all know, he became the first Black president of South Africa. And another quick story is that he visited my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, when I was probably like, I don't know, 4 or 5. All I remember, my dad, if you think I'm loud and boisterous, you ain't meet my dad, okay? He's on another level. And we are in this auditorium, like a city hall of Pittsburgh. And all I remember him yelling out was, Nelson, my daughter's name is Mandela. And it was his attempt at trying to get him to meet me. It didn't happen, but everybody in the whole room knew my name, and that's my name, and I'm sticking to it. The other question around if I could wave a magic wand, wouldn't that be nice to turn my emoji magic wand into a real magic wand and change something? I think I would change. Which is what I'm currently working on, is changing the what is it called? Like the pattern matching that takes place in Silicon Valley. And, you know, we're all biased, right? I don't care what color you are, what gender you are, we're all biased. That's how humans are wired, because that's how we make decisions and that's how we stay away from danger. But when you don't recognize your biases and how they could be over indexing on certain groups of people to a detriment, right, to an injustice level, that's when it goes wrong. And so I think for me, if I could wave my magic wand, I would love for people to start, like people being investors, to start valuing things like distance traveled. Is that, you know, if you are the daughter or son or child of parents who went to Harvard and their parents went to Harvard, and then you go to Harvard, right? You going to Harvard and having that on your resume may not be as big of a deal as somebody who you are the first in your family to go to college, period, let alone Harvard. You come from the projects of Spanish Harlem, living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 11 brothers and sisters like my parents, like my dad did, right? It's different, right? So it's not just about your pedigree and what you see on a resume, but it's about where people started and where people started and everything they've had to overcome in their life just to be where they are today. That counts for something. That's grit. That's growth mindset. That's perseverance. That's hustle. That's resourcefulness. That's all sorts of qualifications that actually make great CEOs.
So one more question here from Emily Cheng. Thanks so much, Mandela. This was the energy I needed. Any advice on misalignment, losing motivation on a niche tech business that isn't yet positive revenue yet, but great traction since launch? How do you differentiate it if it's a season of entrepreneurship or a sign of a pivot?
Oh my goodness, Emily, a woman of my heart. That's a good question. That is such a good question. So how do you know when things aren't going up and to the right in your business, if in like in your case, in a revenue sort of way, if it's time to pivot your business, or if you just don't feel as motivated to figure out the solution and how to get it up and to the right? I honestly think that you have to check in with the personal return on investment you're getting from doing this work. Like, I actually believe in being super selfish. I believe in being super selfish, because if you aren't like truly motivated by what you're doing, and like you haven't figured out like, this gives me so much purpose and meaning, or this is going to give me a huge payout at the end, or this is going to increase my brand or build my network, like you need to be selfish with deciding, why are you waking up to chew on glass every day to do this business? Like, you need to have a selfish reason, a very selfish reason. And if you are at a place where you can't identify the ROI that means something to you on keep doing this, and that happens over and over again across a period of weeks or months, you may, you may have the signal that you need that this isn't where you're going to get the return on investment for your time and your energy and your talents that you want. And so maybe it's time to reimagine where to place yourself. Right.
And
However,
if earlier about sunk cost evaluation too, like you got to be able to let go of that and like.
Yes. Or if you ask yourself the question, like, if I can figure this out, if I keep working at it, like, what could be the result for me? What could be the result for me? And if that motivates you to keep going and try, to go for it. But until it really pierces your heart, until it really motivates you, it's gonna be hard because it's so much work. Oh, I know it's so much work.
Oh, last question for me before we go. Thank you for everybody for joining. How do people who aren't underrepresented founders be better allies?
Yes. Oh, I love that question. So listen, my program Founder Gym is all focused on underrepresented founders, but most of the investors we bring in are not from underrepresented backgrounds because that's how the investor landscape is right now. Also, I do a lot of angel investing. I invest in all sorts of founders, right? Black, yellow, purple, brown, here, there, right? I have a whole diverse network of people who I chose to plant myself in that environment so I could benefit from that, right? And so if you are someone who doesn't identify as underrepresented, but maybe you're overrepresented in this space, and how could you be a good ally? I think the most important thing is to start in your personal life. I really do. I believe starting in your personal life and really reflecting on your friend groups, really reflecting on your social circles, where you hang out. Like part of really, I think, building allyship is building empathy. And the way to build empathy is to really connect with people on a human level, on a friendship level, getting to know them as people and not necessarily as potential investment opportunities or mentees. Right? But just get to know people because it humanizes them, and you will see that there are so few differences between you and them, and they have hopes and dreams and aspirations and skill sets you don't have that you can learn from. And I really do believe if you want to be a great ally, start by being a great friend to groups outside of your own.
Thanks for being part of my ally journey.
Yes, for sure.
You're terrific. Thanks for being here today. Everybody, thanks for joining us on this call. And Mandela, I said, when the fan club opens up, let me know. I'm in. I get my posters ready.
Yay, awesome. Okay, so Dave, do me a favor. You know I love my social media. I want to take a photo of us. Smile on the camera for me. All right, I want to remember this day. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And final plug, I just put the link to the founder cohort applications in the chat. So apply by June 30th. And yeah, Dave, Mandela, thank you. That was awesome. I'm jacked up. I'm ready to get to work now. So see you all. Happy Tuesday.